Okay, we are in Halacha level 2, class number 3. We're talking about today actual Halacha. So welcome back, guys. Again, those that joined right now, next week we're not gonna have class on Monday, and we'll figure out exactly how we're gonna do, if it's gonna be postponed for a week or not, or based on how many are coming, how many are not. But next week will be the flight day for those that are coming, so this class won't be meeting next week, and we'll have more info probably later at the end of the week for what the schedule is actually going to be. Okay. Let's talk halacha. Let's talk halacha. We spoke the last 2 weeks about the history of halacha, the who's chayav, more bigger ideas about halacha. This week we're getting practical. We're starting with the actual halachot. We're starting with the actual laws, the actual rules of halacha. And B'ezrat Hashem, I'm going to share my notes with you guys right now. I had posted in the group like 2 weeks ago my actual notebooks, but I'll put it up on the screen over here. Okay. We mentioned last time about the Shulchan Aruch. We mentioned about the main book of Jewish law, written in the 1500s, the rest of Karo, the Sephardic rabbi, of Moshe Isserles, the Ashkenazi rabbi. They came together. They made this book of halacha. The first, and practical halacha, things that still apply in today's time. The first halachot they speak about is how you wake up in the morning. Now, question for you guys. Anybody here study Mishnayot? Anybody in high school did Mishnahs? Anybody did Mishnah in high school? Gemara in high school? Anybody know what the first Gemara is? The first Mishnah is? Yeah. Okay, easier question. So the first Mishnah is Berachot, brachas. Anybody ever study brachas? The oral Torah in the halacha books that we're studying, the halacha books start with the laws of waking up in the morning. But in brachot, in the oral Torah, in the Mishnah, the first book of oral Torah that was written down, it actually starts off with a different halacha. The first halacha is, when do we say Shema at night? Anybody have any idea why would that be the first halacha of the oral Torah? We're not going to start with that because we're going to follow the order of how we wake up in the morning, but a little more organized that way. But anybody have any idea why would the first law in the oral Torah be when we say Shema at night? Any ideas? You guys, not all at once. You're getting too excited over here. Not too fast. So the idea is as follows. We have a tradition in Judaism. When did God create the world? He created the world first at night and then in the day. So really the night laws are earlier than the day laws, but a little bit more practical. The first time you become obligated in halacha is when you're bar mitzvah. And your bar mitzvah starts at night. So what's the very first mitzvah you could do when you become bar mitzvah? Is to say Shema at night. That's your first opportunity. So therefore, the first halacha in oral Torah is Shema at night. Mystically, there's also a deeper idea. What is Shema at night? Shema at night, nighttime is the darkness, are the difficult times in life. Shema is the faith in God. The very first mitzvah is we got to have faith, and we got to step it up even in those dark times. So that becomes the first law of the oral Torah. But in the Shulchan Aruch, in the practical book of law, the way we study nowadays, we start off with waking up in the morning. Now, interesting, the very first halachot are not halachot of what to do. But hopefully we'll get to we'll get to that today, a little bit of what to do. But the very first halachot are a state of mind. Says the Shulchan Aruch, says the main book of law that we follow. First law, when you wake up in the morning, you should wake up in the morning like a lion to serve your creator. Gaber ka'ari, become strong like a lion. You got to roar. You got to be excited when you wake up in the morning. It's a state of mind when you wake up in the morning. Now, really important. It's a state of mind to be excited when you wake up. The halacha is not to sleep like a lion. Anybody know how much a lion sleeps at night? Do you have any ideas? Anybody National Geographic watchers over here? Nobody in the room? They say the average lion sleeps like 20 to 22 hours a day. The halacha is don't sleep like a lion. That's not the halacha. We'll get to the halacha of sleep in a second. Halacha is wake up like a lion. How does a lion wake up? So a lion is sleeping. But all of a sudden, it smells in its sleep, it's dinner. This juicy gazelle comes hopping by. So he's totally fast asleep. But he smells, jumps up, grabs him. That's the excitement of a lion. You wake up excited to serve God. I'm awake. Thank you. Shtabach Shem Olad. It means praise God. I'm excited to be alive. I'm ready to go. I'm like that lion jumping out of bed. At the same time, the halacha writes, but don't actually jump out of bed. That's not healthy. The blood rushes to the face. You get dizzy. Don't do that. Sit up slowly. But in your excitement levels, you want to be excited. I'm alive. Thank God. I'm here. Okay. Cool story that I heard in one of my first halacha classes that I went to. And then I looked it up online, and it was a very fuzzy, nice, touching story. I think it's fake news. I'll tell you why in a second. But it's a cool story nonetheless. There was this meeting of neurologists in England. A bunch of neurologists got together talking about the brain, how the brain works, the body functioning, all that kind of stuff. This professor, this named Linda McMahon, Dr. Linda McMahon stands up and she says, guys, based on my research, it takes 12 seconds for the body to get to like that equilibrium. So you should sit up and take 12 seconds to get out of bed. And the story goes that this religious Jew who was also a doctor, this modern Orthodox professor doctor, stands up and he says, guys, that's unbelievable. Because when I wake up in the morning, I say 12 words. It's perfect. The 12 words for the 12 seconds, unbelievable. Okay, very powerful, exciting story. Problem is, I looked it up, couldn't find any sources to this. Being a faculty at Bar Ilan, I have access to academic articles as well. I researched the lady's name that I found, and I couldn't find it at all. I only found this Professor Linda McMahon on two types of websites. English language halacha websites and Hebrew language halacha websites. Couldn't find it. Then I spoke to some doctors at Bar Ilan who told me it doesn't work that way. Everybody's different and the ages change things as well. Health levels are different. But the idea is, everybody does agree though, don't jump out of bed. So the halacha is, you wake up with excitement, but you don't jump out of bed because you don't want the blood to rush and all that kind of stuff, but do it slowly, get yourself ready. Okay. Next halacha. Man, this is a fun one. Man was created to serve God. So they writes the Mishnah Berurah, don't make up excuses. Like it's too hot, it's too cold. The times just changed here in Israel. We're getting closer to winter. It might start getting colder, although this climate change doesn't look like it so much. It's pretty hot this year. But people start complaining, it's too cold, I can't get out of bed, I need my blanket, I can't leave my blanket, all these things, says the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah was living in Russia in the bitter cold 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 120 years ago. He says, don't make excuses, get out of bed. Next halacha. We get up with excitement and stop making up stories. We get out of bed to serve God, we're alive, that's a really big deal. Okay, next halacha. Okay, next halacha. This is a fun one. Guys, let's do a little in the chat. Write down, how much do you normally sleep on a given night? Guys, put it in the chat. On a given night, what is your average amount of sleep? We got some 8, we got some 7, we got 8 to 9. Okay, good. 6 to 7. How much you sleep on Thursday nights? Oh, sorry, in America, I think it's Saturday nights or something. How much you sleep on Saturday nights? Or 9 hours. I like that, Yoni. Stepping up 9 hours over there. 10 hours over there. Okay, very good. Okay, good. 9. Very good. Says the halacha. It's actually interesting. It's a halacha for meaning when a person is setting up their daily life. How do you set up your daily life? A person should sleep between 6 to 8 hours. You sleep less than that, your body's not going to handle it. You can do it for 1 night, for 2 nights. There's extreme situations. You have to do that. You have to catch your flight. You have to do this. Okay, there's times when you don't sleep. But on a given basis, less than 6 hours, your body's going to break down. Those that are coming to Israel next year, it's going to get very exciting. We're going to have FOMO. We're going to be hanging out with each other up until late. Dorms are going to be alive. First 2 nights, don't sleep, get to know each other. But afterwards, you got to get back into a routine, 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Now, what is it? Is it 6? Is it 7? Is it 8? What is it? So this is actually brought down in different halacha books. The Ben Ish Chai was a big rabbi in Baghdad 100 years ago. He writes it down. The modern day halacha books are writing it down as well. They went to the doctors and they go, "Hello, doctors, how long should a person sleep?" And the doctors came together and they said, "Oh, the body needs somewhere between 6 to 8. Now, when you're younger, you need more. My little 6-year-old, she's going to need 10 to 12 hours. Babies need more than that. But as you get older, and as you get to your age now, guys, 18 is over your 6 to 8. Now, as you get much, much older, I hear when people are under like 60s, 70s, they're sleeping much less. Their hours of sleep, and they're fine. Their body can handle it. But the average person, your age, my age, 6 to 8 hours. Now, is it 6? Is it 7? Or is it 8? So they bring down the halacha books. You got to test yourself out. You got to see. If I sleep 6 hours every night, am I going to be exhausted? If so, you got to sleep more. You got to sleep 7 hours. And then when I sleep 7 hours every night, am I exhausted? Then do 8. And then if you need more sleep than that, then you probably should get yourself checked out. Check those. Let's take a blood test and stuff like that. Try to figure out why you need why you're not sleeping well. You're not getting REM sleep. Then start checking it out. If after 8 hours you still feel you have to have more hours. But I find myself personally, I'm a 7-hour guy. When I don't sleep enough, I don't normally get 7 hours. Too much going on. I have little kids. I have a family. We have a job. We have work and this. But if I get 7 hours, if I would get 8 hours for 3 days in a row, by day number 4, my body couldn't sleep 8 hours anymore. Couldn't handle it. It doesn't need that kind of sleep. 7 hours, my body is nice. 6 hours, I'm very functional. But 7 hours is normally my sweet spot. Figure out your sweet spot. If it's 8 hours, it's 8 hours. If it's 6 hours, then do 6 hours. Says the Akut Yosef, the chief rabbi of Israel today, Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef. He writes, why is it important to figure it out? Is it 6, is it 7, is it 8? Because first off, you want to be healthy. Number 2, because if you're a 7-hour person, don't be sleeping 8 hours a day every single night, because you're losing an hour of life. We only have 120 years in this world, God willing. What are you doing with your time? You're going to sleep for your whole life? We got so much to accomplish. We have mitzvot to do. We got to learn Torah. We got to be good people. We got to do stuff. We got to change this world. We got a mission here. We're not Jews for no reason. God put us here for a reason. We got to do stuff. So let's maximize our time. Let's be alive. Let's step it up. Okay. They also write on those days of the year, like Shavuot, where we stay up all night. He said, God will give you an extra blessing. After you take that nap in the daytime, you'll be able to bounce back quicker. Special blessing on those couple times a year when we stay up a little bit later. Okay. Fine. Okay, so that's the first halacha written by the Shulchan Aruch, written by Rav Yosef Karo. Rav Yosef Karo was the Sephardic rabbi who wrote the Shulchan Aruch. He's known by the Sfaradim by the title Maran. That's what Maran says. He's known by the Ashkenazim by the Mechaber, the writer, Rav Yosef Karo, also known as the Shulchan Aruch. That's his halacha. Wake up like a lion, get excited. And then comes along the Ramah, the Ashkenazi, or Moshe Islis, he's known as the Ramah. He comes along and he says his first halacha. What's his first halacha? A person should think when he wakes up. We're still in the mindset. We're not doing things yet. We're waking up with our brains first. That's consciousness. We wake up. What do we say? Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, which means I place Hashem before me always, constantly. I put Hashem in front of me. And for those of you that go to old school shuls, this pasuk, Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, is written on top of the Aron Kodesh. You'll find this in many shuls. You'll find it on top of sidurs, old school synagogues. The synagogue was built in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. That's probably the verse that's written on top. If it's a more modern shul, then nowadays people find other psukim that they like. They'll put psukim like V'afrech Hamocha, Dalif Nimiyatab, other psukim that they like that are fun verses. But at old school shuls, that's what they put on top. I place God before me always. It's the first halacha in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, people, hello. I want some conversation here. Why would that be the first mindset that the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isser's writes we have to have when we wake up? Why is that so important to place God before me as my first thing I think about when I wake up? Ideas, people, ideas. Level 1 came up with like 3 ideas for this. I'm sure that in level 2 over here, you guys come up with some ideas. Why is this the first idea that we're supposed to wake up with? That I place God in front of me. Why is that so important? That the Ramah writes, it's the first thing I have to think about when I wake up. Right? We started off with the attitude, wake up like a lion. We figured out how much to sleep. And now the first idea is placing God in front of me. Let's go, guys. Not all at once. Now don't get too excited over here. Let's get some ideas. Bobby, give me an idea. Why is placing God in front of me what I'm supposed to think about when I wake up? What does that do for me? Why is that a powerful idea?
It could be a way of living. Like if God is always before you, then you wouldn't do some things that you shouldn't be doing.
Excellent. Okay, good. Excellent. Number one, fear factor, awe factor. If God's in front of me, then someone's watching over me. I got to do the right thing. You know, if I'm about to wake up, make my first choices. As Jews, we want to make every choice be a good choice. So thinking about God being there, that already puts me on my toes. Okay, I want to do the right thing because someone's watching. I'm not behind closed doors. God's there with me too. Okay, good. That's one idea. Fear factor. Like it. Other ideas? What's another idea? Why is that an important idea? Different angle. Other ideas? Placing God in front of me. What can that do for me? Another idea. Another idea is a little bit the flip side of the coin of what Bobby said. Bobby brought up the fear factor. There's also the love factor, the security factor. I recognize that God's always there. So if God's always there, that puts me in a certain mindset that I'm going to be okay. God's gonna take care of me, and I'm gonna be good. Things are gonna be okay. God is watching. Now, that doesn't mean life's gonna be easy. You know, we're still gonna have wars, we're still gonna have craziness. But to recognize that God is still there and God is watching, that's part of God's plan, even the hard times, even that. It's a certain security level that I'm not alone. There's somebody else watching for me. So it creates a love factor as well as a fear factor, the security level. It also makes me realize, well, if God is around watching me, there's big things going on in the world. God actually cares enough that I'm here and is here in front of me, and he cares enough about me existing. There's some much bigger plans than just what I'm going to eat for breakfast. You know, like there's much bigger things we want to try to get to in life. Okay. Back to the notes. Then says the Rama, don't be embarrassed by those who mock you when you serve God. Somebody starts getting more religious, starts putting on tefillin in the morning, starts saying Modeh, starts spending all this time doing mitzvot, and somebody starts mocking you. Why are you being so Jewy? Why are you doing so much mitzvot? Says the Rama, ignore. Be strong. Remember, God's in front of you. God's with you. You'll be okay. Ignore. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the commentary, ignore it. Don't fight back. Don't start yelling back. That guy's making fun of you. Ignore him. You know, grow some. Get some stronger shoulders. Even be toughen it out a little bit, but ignore. Now, interestingly, the ignore is fun. Is interesting. Why ignore it? Maybe you should go out swipe the guy, start punching him. What's this idea of it? Well, why ignore him? But here's the idea that I heard. Why do we ignore those that mock us? Now, the Mishnah Berurah says ignore those that make fun of you, unless they're trying to destroy Judaism. If they're not just making fun of you, but they actually want to try to cancel things. They want to close your synagogue. They want to cancel the Israel group on your campus. They want to, if it's something on that level, then you got to fight back. Then you got to step it up. But if it's just like one of your friends making fun of you for being Jewish, for being Jewy, ignore. Why do you ignore? So he writes, so that you don't become what that person is. If that person's mocking and annoying and that kind of stuff, don't become one of those people. Don't become one of these aggressive people that has to always fight back about everything. You have to fight when you got to fight. I had a nice idea. You know, like I grew up in South Florida. In South Florida, especially in those days, you have a lot of old people, and you can get your permit when you're 15 years old. You start driving when you're 16, and you start driving around South Florida, and people drive slow. Now today, a lot of New Yorkers moved down. The speed level has gone up a lot, and the impatience has gone up a lot. But back then, growing up in the 90s in South Florida, you're driving around, and people are chill. Then I remember I got married. I moved to Brooklyn. Any New Yorkers over here? Any Brooklyn people over here? City people? The city people, the driving there is really crazy. But there it's so crazy that it's really insane. But Brooklyn, it's like aggressive. City's aggressive too. New Jersey people, it's aggressive driving. My first day, I drove up. My wife, I was just recently married after a year and a half. My wife was pregnant, and we drove up to Brooklyn. We're married for a year and a half. Our first time really living. My wife had lived in the city before that a little bit, but we're moving to Brooklyn. It's before Waze. It's before Google Maps. So what was Google Maps back then? You went on Google website and you printed out a map, and that's what you drove with. So I get to Brooklyn, and in Flatbush, there's this one street that's like a triangle. It's like where Quinton means Kodiana. If anybody's been in Brooklyn, it's one of these streets that it's not like it curves over, becomes like a triangle. And I remember trying to figure out where do I make the left turn? Where does Quinton end? Where does that? Where was King's Highway? And if those that know Brooklyn, it's like this funny triangle street. And all of a sudden, the light turns red. I'm looking at this map. I slam on the brakes, and I go a little bit into the curb where the people are into the crosswalk. And this older guy, in his 70s, walks by my car slowly and spits on my car. That was my welcome to Brooklyn. It's the craziest, most aggressive driving ever. I remember South Florida, we have this thing called parking lots. For those of you that are in New York, you don't understand what this means. You go places, LA people over in the room over here, it's somewhere in the middle. But in South Florida, you can drive places and you can park there. And there's and outside of your house or your building, there's parking. It's a crazy concept that you don't have to stress out when you want to go to the store. In Brooklyn, it doesn't work that way. Number one, there's no parking. Number two, you have to fight for any space you find on the street. And then they came up with this idea called alternate sides. For some reason, in other places in the world, they can figure out how to clean streets and it doesn't affect parking. But here, if you don't move your car at 7 a.m., you get a ticket on your car. You have to pay money. It's crazy concepts over here. So it creates aggressive driving. Then I moved to Israel. Then I got used to Bnei Brak. What's Bnei Brak? Right next to the dorms, one city over is Bnei Brak. In Bnei Brak, there's no space, there's no parking, but everybody also has motorcycles, and little kids walk on their own to school, and you have thousands of 6-year-olds crossing the street, things that would never happen in America. Thousands of 6-year-olds crossing the street every single day with motorcycles. It's the craziest situation. That creates aggressive driving. And it affects you with time. And then I remember going back to visit my parents, Aleim Shalom, in Miami, and all of a sudden, the light turns green. The old lady in the car in front of me is not driving. So what do? I start honking, start driving around them. No patience. Growing up, never had that. Your character traits change based on your surroundings, based on who your friends are, who your friend groups, and who your neighborhood is. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if people are messing with you, get out of that environment. Don't start fighting with that environment. You start fighting, you're going to start turning into them. When do you have to fight? If they're doing something big, they're fighting against Judaism, fighting against Torah, mitzvahs, your synagogues, your Jewish, that's when you have to fight back. So you have to know when, where, but on a daily basis, the idea is not to be aggressive. Keep your character traits. It's better to have those calmer character traits than to be that aggressive craziness. Okay, fine. Next halacha. Okay, next halacha. This is an interesting one. Says the Shulchan Aruch, it's proper for a person with Yirat Shamayim. Let me know what Yirat Shamayim means. What does Yirat Shamayim mean?
Fear of heaven/God.
What does that mean? Walk around scared all the time? It's good. Literally means fear of God. What does it mean, fear of God?
Recognizing God's authority.
Oh, excellent. Recognizing God's authority. I think it also, instead of fear, a better word is awe. Fear is correct. Part of Yirat Shamayim, you have to have yira, you have to have fear. But I think awe is the better thing. Somebody who wants to live in awe of God, which means somebody who wants to be a good person, who has higher divine ideals that they try to reach for. What should they do? What should be the first thing they think about? Okay, so we spoke about, up until now, we spoke about an attitude. Wake up with excitement. Perspective. There's God in the world next to me. Now the next thought, says the Shulchan Aruch, that you have, remember and be pained that the temple was destroyed. Okay, show of hands. Who in the world over here wakes up thinking, oh my God, God's temple is destroyed? Anybody even think about that at all? Is that one of the first 25 thoughts that go through your mind when you wake up in the morning? Not so much, right? Why in the world would that be one of the first thoughts we should have? Why? It's so depressing. Temple's destroyed. Like, what's that all about? Why should that be one of the first thoughts that we have? Any ideas? Any ideas? Okay, here's what I thought. Here's what I heard. There's a famous teaching of the rabbis. Any generation that doesn't rebuild the temple, it's as if they destroyed it. Now, in traditional Judaism, how do we rebuild the temple? Through our good deeds, through changing the world. And when the world reaches a stage where more of the world recognizes God and is acting divine, that's going to be when the temple will be rebuilt. There are some more extremist Jews today that are actually trying to physically recreate the temple. That's not mainstream, though. Mainstream is what's going to recreate the temple? Our actions. Either we're going to rebuild it once the world recognizes, or it's even going to come down from the heavens, according to the Kabbalists. But the idea is our good actions will lead to it being rebuilt. If we're not on that level as a Jewish people, then the world won't be on that level, says the Gemara, and it's as if we destroyed it. Meaning, we have responsibility to get to a place where God could have a home in this world again. The temple is God's home in this world. God's home is destroyed. We have to try to get to a place and move the world in a direction. This is like a communal mitzvah of trying to get the world to a place. We do it from an individual with our own personal actions, but we have to try to build the world to be ready for a temple. If the temple is destroyed, that means we're not there yet. And our generation hasn't done it. This is not supposed to make us depressed. Rather, what's it supposed to do? It's supposed to give us a divine mission. We have something to do. We just said we woke up with excitement. We know there's God in the world. And now we have a mission. We got to make it better. And part of the temple being destroyed also reminds us the world's not perfect. It's got problems. It's a very sobering idea that we as Jews always know the world's not perfect. But we also know it's our job to try to get closer to that perfect. To try to bring the whole world to that perfect. So it's supposed to remind us about our mission, about our purpose, and we're waking up for a reason. We're waking up to do something with our lives. Okay. But then it goes on to say, don't be depressed when you actually pray and talk to and learn and learn Torah. Be happy, simcha. Our main basis is simcha. We're happy people. We're happy. We're very actually on every stat of the Jewish people anywhere. They statistics of Israel with all of our wars and all of the things we deal with over here. We're some of the happiest. We're much happier than you Americans and you Canadians out here. I mean, we're happy. We're a happy people, the Jewish people. Even though there's difficulty, even though we know the temple was destroyed, there's major hardships that happen to us all the time. But that fuels us to try to reach towards perfection, which also fuels us to have simcha in the good things that we do. Okay. Next halacha. Okay, next halacha, number 6, dangerous. Who's ready for a dangerous halacha, people? Dangerous halacha. You ready for a dangerous halacha? Those that went to like really yeshiva kind of high schools, they're not teaching this halacha. They're too scared. They're too scared to teach you this one. Okay, halacha number 6. Fewer prayers with kavanah are better than many prayers without kavanah. Okay, people, who knows what the word kavanah means? Kavanah in English.
Concentration.
Concentration. Okay, Judah, what did you say?
Intent.
Intent, concentration. Okay, both correct. Intent for what?
Well, it depends on the context, Rabbi.
And when it comes to prayer?
Intent to connect with God, or
Good.
you intend the words you're saying.
Okay,
Something
good. Okay. Bobby, what did you say? What was the word you used?
Concentration
Concentration on what?
on focusing on what you're saying.
Focus on what you're saying. Okay, that's kind of like Judah's second idea of intent. Any other definitions for the word intent? Oh, for kavanah? It's funny. It's a Hebrew word that has a lot more behind it than you can translate into English. What kavanah really, the essence of kavanah is that I'm talking to God and having a conversation, and I'm not reading a book about a conversation with God. You hear the nuance? Prayer is supposed to be talking to God and having a conversation, and not reading a sidur that discusses a conversation with God. To actually be conversing with God. That's the concept. Who am I talking to? I'm not talking to a wall. I'm actually talking to Hashem. Now, part of talking to Hashem is also what you guys are saying, which is knowing what the words mean. Now, you could have prayer without knowing what it means. There are many people out there who they love to say Tehillim, especially women out there. Girls are a little bit more stronger at this than guys are, but you have guys too. You have Tehillim people. Tehillim people, they don't know what every single word means. The words are hard in Tehillim, but they know they're connecting to God. They're saying, God, I'm praying for somebody's health. I'm praying for safety, security, whatever your person is praying for. And these words are just part of the system that I'm doing to you, God. But you feel you're connecting. That's called prayer. Another level of prayer is to actually know what we're saying. To actually know what the words. What does it mean? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What does it mean? What do these words mean? That makes it a little bit stronger, that the conversation is more real. For those that Hebrew is not your first language, it makes it much harder. And you have to learn what the words mean. Get English translations in your Siddur. Start to learn deeper understandings. You see that the word kavanah itself has a lot of nuance to it that English can't capture in one word. Hebrew is a much richer language in the sense that we have roots of words, and in those roots, there's a lot behind those roots of those words. So therefore, kavanah means connecting to God. I know what I'm saying. I'm understanding what I'm saying. And there's different levels to kavanah. The most basic, though, is that I'm actually talking to God. It's better to have fewer prayers where you're talking to God than many prayers when you're just reading a book. Now, for women, this ruling is very big because they're not as obligated as much as guys are rabbinically of what to say and what not to say. So they actually, the more pure their prayer is, and the simplest form is great. For guys, it depends what kind of guy you are. It depends what you're holding. You know, there are some basic things that we want to say. We have the Shema, we have the Amidah, we have the blessings of the Shema. There's certain base things that we as Jews hold as important parts of our prayers. But from my previous experience with Bar Ilan students over the years, and myself when I was 18 years old, it's hard to say the whole Siddur. And sometimes it's good to start off with fewer prayers and make them really meaningful. Like I would translate kavanah, prayer with kavanah, as meaningful kavanah. Making it meaningful as opposed to just reading a lot of a book and not knowing what I'm doing. Now, we're not saying if a person could do many prayers with a lot of kavanah, that's even better. But at this stage, and if you're not that big, anybody here big tefillah person that loves to pray all the time? We always have one or two of those a year. Any big prayer people? I say the vast majority are, you know, Bobby, you're a big prayer guy. You like the whole Siddur. I want to get the shul. I want to say korbanot before, and I want to be saying the after. Like at the end of my Siddur, there's like the 10 commandments and the 13 principles and certain people. I find this a lot in Moroccan, old school Moroccan shuls. These old guys get there and they sit there and like any extra words you could add, they're going to add to the Siddur, and they're going to add beginnings and endings, and they're going to pass out the Hillim at the end. And there are certain like tefillah people. I find older people's shuls are much more into this. Younger people's shuls, the Syrian shuls are the businessmen, not at all. The Ashkenazi shuls have cut out half the Siddur already. They got to get to work. But I find some of the old school Sephardic Siddur shuls are still into this. The more prayers, the better. If you're one of those people, it's beautiful. It's unbelievable. Pray with kavanah. Say everything. If you're not one of those people, I think it's time to start work on it. Those that are coming to Israel next week on the group flight, let's sit, let's talk, let's build a prayer system. Those that are in America, reach out to me on WhatsApp. We can build a prayers that work for me. Where am I holding in life? You know, it's going to take a couple of baseline questions of what are you doing now? For those that are doing nothing right now, it might be time. Let's start working on Shema with Tefillin. Let's start working on Amidah. You know, for those of you that already are doing all that kind of stuff. Okay, what do we understand? What do we not understand? How far does my kavanah level work? Until what prayer? There's always room to work on prayer. And I'm speaking to myself as well. It's time to build it. But the rule over here is fewer that are meaningful is much greater than a lot without, but there is a baseline for when you're ready for that baseline. Questions on that? Questions? Okay. Next halacha is an interesting one. We have a rule in halacha, a baseline rules, that a person really shouldn't start his job, shouldn't really start his learning until he prayed to God first. Now, that doesn't mean like you can't make your bed when you wake up, you can't brush your teeth. That's not what it means. But before a person goes to actual work, you're supposed to start the day by praying. Now, how much prayer depends on the person. But you're supposed to start off with some kind of prayer. You can have a cup of coffee in the morning too. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. But you're supposed to start off with a prayer before you go to work. Now, some of you might have gone to high schools where they didn't do it that way, where they first had first period class and only prayers second period. It's funny. It's against basic halacha. And 30 years ago, no school did that. Everybody always started with prayer. Why do they do that now in a lot of schools? Anybody went to school where you had a first period class before prayer? Anybody did that? I know in New York schools are pretty big on it. So are South Florida and LA. I think they're still doing prayers first. I'm not sure. But a lot of schools have moved to a class before prayer. That's not ideal. Why do they do that though? Because when they started with prayers, people were coming late. When you start with first period class, you'll make it the prayers. And they want the kids to learn how to pray because they don't pray in school, they're not praying at home, a lot of them. But so there are exceptions. And if you have to have a doctor's appointment, if your work only starts before the sun rises, then it's different. If you're driving to work, which is where prayer is, like when I drive from my home to Minyan at Bar Ilan, so I'm driving to work, but that's still called a set schedule. So there are exceptions all over the place. But on a baseline, you're supposed to set up your schedule where you have prayer first. For those that are picking jobs right now, I remember when I went to University of Florida, so like before, there was a conditioning class. Do you take the 7 a.m. conditioning class for college credits where you work out in the morning, or do you take the 8 a.m. or the 9 a.m.? Take the later class so you could pray first, as opposed to vice versa, and just setting up your day. Okay, fine. So that's the mindset. That's the ideology. We wake up like a lion with excitement. We slept enough. We're healthy. We are thinking about God in our lives, being there. He's watching over us. He's behind us. He's our security. It's our fear factor. We remember the temple. We have a mission in life. And then we get to the first law. Yeah, Judah.
Rabbi, you mentioned his mission in life, and this kind of relates to our last period, but I wanted to get your opinion on it. Do you think that the purpose in life, if you're a religious Jew, is it first, is it universal? And if it is it to get closer to and serve God?
So I think there's individual purpose. It's a good question. Like, first off, a bigger question: why did God create us? But that's not this class. By Rabbi Clapper talks about that in his classes and stuff. But on a base level, there's an individual purpose, and then there is a national purpose and a world purpose. It's all. Now in the world purpose, we got to get the world to a certain place. Meaning, if I just focus on myself all the time, that's selfish. Part of our rules, part of our halachot, and part of our ethics is not to be selfish people. We say, imani latzmi, mani. If I only care about me, what am I? At the same time, we have personal things. We have personal religious things, personal godly things, personal emotional things, and we have ben adam lechavero things we got to be doing. So I think that part of it is my personal connections to God. Part of it's my personal connections to my friends, to myself. So I think it's a bigger thing of trying to get the world to a place of perfection. Now, how do you define perfection? There's a lot that's involved in that. There's a lot. I think right now, with what's going on right now in the world, part of our mission in the world is to educate the world about stop being haters, stop being evil. I think we have a mission in this world to teach the world about being good people, about not hating Jews and anybody just because, I think there's part of that as well that goes into it, along with my own personal recognition of God and Shabbat, and that's what I'm saying. I think there's a lot involved in what it is to be a human being. I also think a lot of it's very individual of what are your strengths. I have some alumni right now where their strength is to be on social media right now fighting for the Jewish people. I have other alum, they don't have that strength at all. Their strength is to be there for their family, to be there for their friends, to organize local events, just to learn themselves, to strengthen themselves. I think it's very individual, and you have to start learning yourself. I think now at 18, you're beginning to, though, figure out who am I. 18, 16, 13 to 18, you realize that I have a brain, I can ask questions. Now at 18, I think 18 to 21 is the time of your life where you start to realize I have certain character traits. I'm not perfect. And I got to work on things. And I have certain strengths that I can harness in a certain kind of way. That help, Judah? Help a little bit? Follow up. You can have follow up to that,
Well, I guess the answer was a lot less clear than I was expecting, but
Meaning, I don't think the answer is, what does God want from you? To wake up in the morning, put on tefillin, say Shema, and ignore the world. But I also don't think what God wants from you is, go out there, just fight for Israel, and don't say Shema and recognize there's a God. I think there's so many layers.
Rabbi Clapper made the argument that it brings you closer to God when you're doing all these other types of things because they're mitzvot, like creating a family or even going to the gym and going to get a good night's sleep. That's all getting yourself closer to God because it's making because it's following the mitzvot that
Okay,
he said.
good. I like it. He's quoting the Mesilat Yesharim.
Yeah.
Mesilat Yesharim says, why did God create us? To get pleasure by getting close to God. That's the Mesilat Yesharim. That's one approach. It's very good. A second approach is that because God told us because God told us to be perfect, meaning less for me to connect to God, but more because God has a bigger agenda for the world. You know,
Okay.
the Rambam, Maimonides, the rationalist, he takes a couple steps back, saying some of these questions are a little bit too big because we don't know it all. So I actually think there's three approaches to that. But I think it's correct what he's saying. But I think it's much more. But I'm saying even in his thing, okay, based on what he was saying, how do you know what to do though? Where do you put your time? What do you focus on? Where do you put more of your energy? And that I think is much more about your personality, your source of your personality, and how to harness your strengths and fix your weaknesses. And fix them in three areas: between yourself and God, between yourself and your friends, between yourself and yourself. And you have to work on those three areas and then to figure out where's the best use of your time. Awesome. Those are the first halachot. If anybody has any other questions, the first halachot was state of mind. We didn't get to, but we're going to start next week with the actual first actions that we do when we wake up. But I thought interesting that we start off with state of mind halachot before we get into the actual doing stuff. Thank you, guys. Any other questions? Judah, if you have more follow-ups, I'm around.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I'm all right, Rabbi, for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Awesome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yom Tov.
Oh wait, Rabbi.
Yeah.
I move. Now